McAfoose, and I am coming to you from Denver, Colorado. I've been a longtime friend of OI, and I've recently joined the team as co-chair of the Board of Governors, along with Cassie Burns. I'm thrilled to be supporting Opportunity International in this capacity, as I feel really drawn to eradicating extreme poverty, as I know all of you are on this call as well. It's wonderful to see the members of the Opportunity family on this team. I wanted to extend a special thanks to the members of our board, the Ambassadors Council, Board of Governors, and for all the women warriors on this call today. I extend a heartfelt welcome. For those of you who don't know who the women warriors are, there's a bunch of us ladies. We went to India on an insight trip together for 2 weeks last year, and now we're all connected in the shared love of tackling poverty. And we were in the esteemed company of our CEO, Atul Tandon, who is a very, very patient man. Poor Atul, he was on this trip with all these women, and we talked and talked and talked our way through India, and he was very gentle with us. In our time together today, we're gonna hear, of course, from our CEO, Atul Tandon, Tim Strong, our head of agricultural finance, and Isaac Jesse, head of agricultural in Ghana. We'll discuss the impact of COVID-19 on agriculture and our clients, and how we're pivoting our agricultural services during this critical time. And then after that, we'll move into Q&A with you all. During the call, you can ask a question by, if you look at the bottom of the screen, there's a chat button. And you can either type the question, or if you'd prefer, you can just say, I have a question, and Katie will call on you live during the Q&A portion of the call. Before we get started, I wanted to share a quote that Atul has recently shared with us. The statement was written in The Economist on April 18th. If doctors and nurses are on the front line of the health crisis caused by this pandemic, then bankers are on the front line of the economic response. I thought this was a very appropriate quote to begin our day with, as all of us on the call are on the front line of this world pandemic, and now we are part of the solution of how we move forward. So now for today's topic, how our farmers are being impacted by COVID-19. Let's jump right in. All right, so my first question is to Isaac. I'd love to start with our guest from Ghana. Can you tell us what you're seeing in your community in terms of a response to this pandemic?
Thank you, Carrie. The first thing to note is that some of market centers and marketplaces where our farmers go to sell their produce have been closed down by the city authorities. And the reason is quite simple, that there are a lot of people in the marketplaces. These people are not keeping social distancing protocol that has been directed by the health authorities. So the local authorities have no option than to close down these markets. We have areas where markets have been open, and even with that, for the government to really curb the spread of COVID-19, farmers or the market women have actually been divided into groups so that they will be able to go without, creating any, causing any spread of COVID-19. So what the authorities have done, depending on the numbers of people that go to the farm, they divide the group. Sometimes they could have about 4, 5, 6, or even 10 groups, depending on the number of people that go to the marketplace. And what they do is that this first batch will go to the market today or this week to sell their farm produce. And then the next group will go tomorrow or next week to sell their produce. And each group has to go until everybody has the opportunity to sell their produce. And just like I said, or it's because they want to do whatever they can to stop the community spread. We also have a restriction on movement to some communities. For instance, Kumasi, where I live, was locked down for 3 weeks. And Kumasi has a lot of satellite marketplaces where our farmers travel from their villages to come and sell their farm produce. And the period that we were in the lockdown, they couldn't come because even getting transport from the rural communities to Kumasi to sell your produce was very difficult to do. Also, schools that buy from our rice farmers, our maize farmers, our vegetable farmers, and other food crops, as I speak, remain closed. So what it means that these farmers do not have access to sell their produce, and if even they have the opportunity to sell, because of the restrictions and all these challenges, sometimes they take prices that are not very good, but they do not have options. Bearing in mind that most of these farm produce are perishable, that could last for just a day or two. So they will have no option than to sell. So as we speak, now the major concern of our farmers is to manage and feed their family and save them from starvation. So at this particular period, repayment of loan is the last item on the list of our farmers. Thank you.
Thanks, Isaac. Tim, how is COVID-19 impacting your farmers?
So, Carrie, I'm starting to rethink the schedule on the webinar. It's kind of hard to follow that presentation from Isaac. I'd also like to add that Isaac's team was the first across our network in terms of our agricultural financing programs to actually get a letter from the local government to have permission to provide ongoing critical services despite travel restrictions and lockdowns. So Isaac's team, all of the bank staff at OISL, Opportunity International Savings and Loans in Ghana, have been continuing through this crisis day in, day out. But that's all an aside on my side, Carrie.
Yeah.
So my greetings to everybody from Lilongwe, Malawi, where my family and I are remaining throughout this crisis. I am so thrilled and excited to have this time together with everyone on the call. I'm seeing so many familiar faces, partners, supporters throughout this list. It's absolutely fantastic. And I know that many of you share our passion for farmers in rural communities around the world. Many of you, and I can list off names on this list, have taken journeys with us over the years and have seen, met, conversed with the farmers that we work with. Carrie, I think you yourself were on a trip last year as well, right?
Yeah, I was actually just in Uganda a few months ago, and I was lucky to be in Rwanda a few years ago. Yeah.
So, if you guys will do me a little favor here during this report, I would be really happy if you can think back to the faces and the farms that you have in your memory. I want you to think about their crops in the field, the constant challenges to compete for the best prices possible, the distances that these farmers have to travel to make it to market to sell the crops on a regular basis. And for those of you who have traveled with us, definitely think about the roads that they have to travel. I know many of us have bumped along a lot of these roads together over the years. So these are the same farmers that are still producing vegetables, soy, grain, and meat that the cities across Africa and around the world need every day. So even more so now as travel bans, government lockdowns, and transport bans are directly affecting the flow of critical food items where they are really needed most. Specifically, COVID-19 has really created a global health crisis. And we all know that. Many are locked down in their homes, but I think we're also starting to see that it's also creating a very significant financial and nutritional crisis. Governments have been very swift to react, like the government in Ghana, where Isaac is reporting in from. But at the same time, food insecurity is now becoming a global reality, and we are extremely concerned about this. Take, for example, our partners who are continuing to operate in the Democratic Republic of Congo. country as a whole is directly listed as a hotspot by the World Bank and meets all 4 of their qualifying factors and criteria for emergency response. And we know that given the poverty rates of the farmers we work with, particularly in the northern parts of DR Congo, the limited capacity of distribution networks, that this is really a dire situation that we're looking at. Farmers and financial institutions, we are fighting ourselves on the front line. We look at the communities around us and food security. Hunger really is a terrifying issue. Farming families and urban families alike, we're seeing rapidly depleting food reserves. People are really beginning to suffer. And your support is allowing us to continue in this fight day in and day out. Carrie, I promise I'm wrapping it up. I'm watching the clock, but on my side, just kind of to share some of the stats about our portfolio and what we're seeing. Our first glance, within the first month, we calculated that immediately 9,000 farmers and over 2,300 agribusinesses are at extreme risk of completely losing their livelihoods within the first month of this going on. If the lockdowns, travel bans, and lending moratoria continue throughout the year, we're anticipating over 500,000 rural lives impacted amongst the farmers that we support. This is not even including all the other organizations that are still continuing to work alongside us. And with that, 58,000 loans outstanding, risking our new projected disbursements this year to another 80,000 farmers. I really want to mention gender here as well. School closures and economic recessions. The protection of women's economic status is a top priority for all of our agricultural financing programs. And many of you have been able to hear Andrew McCusker, our head of education finance, present on the impact of school closures. We know this, and we know that girls being out of school and women, particularly in rural communities, are the first to lose. So, I just want to kind of close on this question, Carrie, with one kind of final point on my side that when I think about farmers, and when we go back and kind of dwell on this, the point that really stands out to me the most is the farmers' resilience itself and their ability to overcome challenges. And this is farmers here in Malawi, in Ghana, in Rwanda, Uganda, in the Congo, but also in the US. It is incredibly important for our team that we remember to view the global crisis from the farmer's perspective. And remember that literally every year we work with farmers who are affected by the desert locusts in the Horn of Africa or pests like fall armyworm, El Nino, La Nina. Last year we got hit by Cyclone Idai in the region where I am in Mozambique as well. And actually a short aside on this topic, last year we had the privilege of running focus group discussions with farmers in Mozambique that lost their livelihoods due to the cyclone that happened. If you remember, Cyclone Idai hit us in March of 2019, was reported to be the worst tropical storm on record to ever hit the Southern Hemisphere. So one point that really stood out to me in these focus group discussions was that 6 months after the floods receded, the farmers and agribusinesses that rebuilt reported that loan forgiveness and the fact that they had savings accounts at a bank were the major reasons for their ability to start again. And this resilience is the very reason that Opportunity, and most of you, I assume, believe that we should invest in farmers and rural businesses. We partner with people who believe year after year, despite shocks, hardships, floods, drought, pest, disease, they will continue to work for themselves, their families, and their communities. Carrie, sorry for overshooting on my time.
No, Tim, that was so good to hear all of that. And it really hits home how catastrophic it is for our farmers, particularly our female farmers. And it seems like you learned a lot from what happened in Mozambique. So could you tell us how our teams are supporting farmers right now?
Yeah, so I think what's important for us to remember on our side is constantly thinking about the stages and the progression of this crisis. There's short-term effects and immediate effects, and then we're looking at what are the midterm things that are going to happen to farming communities, and then what's the long term. But at the end of the day, our objective is to ensure that farmers can stay afloat now so that they can bounce back tomorrow. And that's our objective. That's what we're working on. So for us at Opportunity, we are pivoting our work to maintain, grow resilience from farmers and supply chains. In terms of our immediate response, through actually many of your direct and ongoing partnerships with us, we are working to redesign our overall operations to meet farmer crises as they happen year on year. But I believe that the ongoing work to achieve the shared vision of rural prosperity across Africa is really a key tool for fighting the immediate effects of COVID-19, but also the longer term effects of hunger and poverty. Carrie, if I can have some time, I've got a short list on this, but I won't take up too much. Just looking at kind of some of the play-by-play actions that we're taking, if that works for you, Carrie.
That works great.
Cool. So first off, it's really critical to not miss out on the harvest season right now. And Isaac, please talk to this on the next question. But what we're seeing is, if the farmers miss on planting right now and aren't able to, we're actually talking about the whole year that will be lost, the whole season. And Isaac shared on this as well. We're continuing to make sure that farmers and small agricultural businesses still get the support and connections and finance that is really critical at this time. To do this, our first port of call is to make sure that agribusinesses also have the capacity to, one, get food to markets, but two, to make sure that seeds and fertilizers continue to move to farmers. We have just launched a new COVID response initiative, and with the first outlay that's come in, we're already mobilizing to look at buying down the interest rates for agribusinesses that are willing to work in this space and continue to move through. We're estimating that the first outlay, we're going to be able to see right off the bat 160 jobs sustained, and first number of businesses across 4 different countries getting no interest loans throughout this period to move forward. This is really out of the ordinary for us, but something that we see as a critical response to make sure that, one, those businesses can continue to employ, but two, to move things and goods and crops to market at the end of the day. Secondly, I think, how can I express this with any more gratitude? Digital, 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 digital. We have been so blessed to have the tools that have been developed by our digital financial services team, to see the progress made within the financial institutions. I really wish we could have 3 more years, but at the same time, so much progress has been made where literally every portfolio is able to transition to having loans repaid and loans dispersed through mobile money services. It's absolutely tremendous. We've been able to share information on public health, preventative measures, best practice from the local ministries of health through WhatsApp and messages. Video with Katie was managed on this, but Katie, I'd say, looking at the clock, maybe we can save it to after the Q&A, as I might be running over a little bit on my section. We all want to make sure that a tool also has enough time to talk, but we can keep that towards the end. We're using technology to support clients remotely. We're continuing to push agricultural training, messaging around where farmers can aggregate crops to sell through both our farmer support agent networks, but also through just standard messaging, just so they're connected throughout this. It's amazing as far as I'm concerned. I never thought that the tools that have been developed would be used for crisis management. Beyond that, we're innovating some of the more interesting financial instruments that we've ever worked with to look at this, to continue to work together. Katie, actually, I do have a photo that I shared with you. I'm not sure if you can pull that up on it. It's around some of the work that we're now doing in terms of also on transport systems.
There we go.
Yeah. Cool.
Is this the one you're talking about?
That's the one right there, Katie. So this is brand new for my team, but as we're seeing, even with messaging and access to markets being pushed as incredibly hard as possible, at the end of the day, a lot of transport companies aren't actually running. And our team members, just like Isaac's, have letters from the government giving us permission to continue to move as a critical service. So this is a picture from just last week here in Malawi, so I have a little bit of bias, but we were organizing actually trucks to move crops to market to make sure that the farmers can still sell at the end of the day. This is not what we typically do, just to reiterate that, but in a time of crisis, we are called to mobilize and to be a point of access for the farmers and the clients that we serve. I think most importantly, we are working on staff care and personal protection. But I might actually pass this over to Isaac if you want to take a minute just to kind of expand in terms of some of the specific initiatives that you guys are taking to make sure that your teams as first-line responders don't get sick.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. I feel really inspired by what you're doing. You're doing a tremendous job. And Isaac, yeah, so how are you keeping your field team safe and protected during this time in Ghana?
Yeah, thank you, Carrie. So far as safety is concerned, the first decision that management took was to ensure that every staff has been given PPEs, such as alcohol-based sanitizers, nose masks, and all those things, just to make sure that the staff are safe. And also they were educated on the symptoms of COVID-19 and then how to keep it spread. So that's the first decision that management took. The second one was to critically look at those whose functions are critical and those that functions were not. So those whose functions were critical were given special IDs to be able to enable them go to the office and work, and then also go to the field and then continue their work as usual. So that those without critical functions could stay home and then work from home. And the idea was make sure that at least we protect the staff from getting this kind of virus. The other thing also that management did was to ensure that we maintain both social relationship and then business relationship with our farmers at this critical period. So data and airtime allocated to first staff were increased so that they can continuously engage their clients to make sure that that relationship is actually not broken. Finally, directives were also given to field officers that might not have access to company's vehicle to go to the field because maybe the vehicles are not available. They were given the directive to use their personal vehicle or to use taxis so that they don't involve themselves in public transport. And what happens that any cost associated with it is actually borne by the institution. So these are the measures that have been put in place. And thank God, so far, none of our staff has been affected by this kind of pandemic.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Isaac. Atul, I mentioned the quote from The Economist earlier when we started our conversation about the bankers being on the front line of the economic response. Can you talk a bit about the status of financial institutions? Are we still lending, and how are we working to keep our partners afloat?
Yeah, thanks, Carrie, and thanks as well to Isaac. Isaac, greetings. Good to meet you virtually. We have worked and traveled together in Ghana, and of course, Tim. Tim, I have to tell you, I visited a long way, probably when you were still in school in Central California. So it's a long journey.
Atul, I think it still looks the same here, unfortunately.
Is that right? And if you put that photograph back, I wanted to share with Tim is that when I started working in India, one of my early jobs, friends, was with a very large agribusiness in northern India, and we used to purchase wheat. So the difference was, go back to that. So the difference, friends, was those bags were made of jute. Right, I'm not even sure that many people know what jute is. It's a fiber, and they were tied together with a rope that in Hindi is called sutli. So I remember I could never pick one of these up. It was very heavy, but sitting in the marketplace and checking the quality of wheat and jute bags that always used to tear and stuff used to fall all over, and then rats would come. So I'm sure I remember that vividly. I'm sure there is something similar happening today. But Carrie, to answer your question, I've been a banker for 40 years, Carrie, running worldwide banking systems for most of my career and multinationals. I would say for the first time in my career, I can stand here and frankly stand tall and say that all our worldwide partners, right, the worldwide network that we have spent decades building of banks, microfinance institutions, local nonprofits to serve the financial needs of the poor, bankers to the poor, everyone is working. That is actually quite a statement to make for those of you who follow economic history. That wasn't even the case in the last global recession that frankly was just, just over 10 years back. So we've made, rapid progress since then. And I'm thankful for the people on this call. You have invested decades of your time, talent, treasure in actually seeing that we can today help millions of people. We have about 7.1 million loan clients around the world. We estimate about 5.5 million or so today have had some form of hardship in livelihood, incomes that have been lost, which are not going to be replaced, incomes either in the marketplace or in farms. Now, the farmers, as Tim explained to you, are impacted even worse because they not only have to sell, but then they have to, use some of the funding, the cash they get now to then do the next harvest. So to answer your question on all right, and the point of resilience that Tim made so eloquently, that what is important for farmers to bounce back is two things: loan forgiveness and access to their savings. So our work with our partners, especially in Africa, where the local infrastructure, economic systems are fragile, and the amount of support available from central banks and others is limited. Our focus in keeping our partners afloat, stay afloat through the crisis, and be ready to bounce back. I call it survive to thrive. For partners to make sure that they can actually extend loan moratoria and extend incremental loans, what they need is liquidity. So we have over the last few weeks arranged large lines of additional liquidity for our partners to draw on, so they have cash available. Remember, the cash is not coming in, loan repayments, and cash is actually going out, all right, as the savings that our farmers and our partners have average of about $44. All right, that's about it. The price of a lunch meal in most cities in America, that's their life savings. So they're drawing the savings, they're not paying the loan. So one is liquidity. The other is the access to savings becomes very, very important. People, especially in rural areas, need cash, not credit cards. So how do you make sure that they have access? So we are very rapidly, including in Ghana, Uganda, elsewhere in Africa, investing in adding phone capacity for people to be able to call in our customers, or digital access, specifically through text messaging, because that's what works. They don't have smartphones. So we are very rapidly doing that. The third is to establish, we have agent networks where local merchants who make cash available, access to cash through their bank accounts can be done through local agents. So we are expanding that and then making sure that the agents have cash. So those are on the client need level, Kerry. The other, I would say, equally important, and you heard Isaac speak to this, is staff care. Literally, we were not trained to be first responders. We are agents of transformation. You come in, we talk to you, we try and get you on a path to great opportunity and a thriving life. Well, now we are having to do communication, and Ghana was the first one actually, putting up in their branches and on their public radio and TV systems, COVID-19 information, how to keep safe, hygiene practices. So now we have become communicators of health practices, right? We are holding hands with our community members and our clients in their small communities, smaller groups, and teaching them, talking to them about safe lending practices, safe access practices, how they can get access to the cash and not have to go to money lenders. So we suddenly become communicators and educators. We've also become the lifeline. Okay, you don't have to pay your loan back. We're going to reschedule the loan. What can we do for you today? So in that, how do you keep the staff safe? And actually, how do you make sure that the impact on profit and loss the staff safe in terms of fully employed. So those are the principal ways on the client side: liquidity, access to cash, digital, massive, quick investments, rapid escalation on digital financial services, and then staff care. Those will be the three principal things with partners.
Atul, I'm always so impressed with Opportunity's ability to educate and to assimilate information to our farmers. And thank you so much for that answer. That's what astounds me the most. Survive to thrive. Well, thank you so much to each of you for sharing the critical work happening right now. To those on the screen, we've all heard these amazing reports about what's going on around the world, and I'm sure you're wondering how you can help. I know that was my first question, is how can I help during this huge crisis? I did ask our friends here at OI if they have set up an emergency fund to try to help with all these needs. And they have, and I'll be sure to give you the details at the end of the call of how we all can help service our farmers and people around the world. We have about 20 minutes right now for Q&A. So a quick reminder, if you guys look on the bottom of your screen there, you can click chat and ask the specific question, or you can just say, I have a question. And again, Katie will call on you and answer them and get those questions up. So Katie, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you again to everyone who's joining us on the call today. I know I found it very informative, and I hope you did as well. So I'm going to jump right in with some of the questions. And if you have one, or if any of the continuing conversation spurs anything for you, please do let me know in the chat. All right, so our first question is, what is happening with crop prices? Have we seen any major drops since entire economies are struggling?
So maybe, Katie, if that's okay, I might take the first stab at this one, and then Isaac, if you want to jump in for how things are looking on the West African side of the continent. From what we're seeing, it's highly variable. A lot of it depends on what crop we're looking at. For a lot of vegetable crops, we are seeing a short increase in prices. But for what we tend to focus on, a lot of crops that are linked into international markets, we're seeing these drop significantly. If you look at the price for soy right now in particular, palm oil as well, that are linked to oil manufacturing, with the global drop in oil prices, those food crops that are then also being sold for oil production, the prices have plummeted dramatically. We're even seeing the market in South Africa starting to have more Brazilian soy pushed into the overall African market to try to compensate for those changes in prices. Globally, we've seen a 4.5% decrease in food prices around the world. Isaac, any perspectives from the West African side?
Yes, in Ghana, prices of food items has just gone up a bit, and just due to the fact that some of these villages do not have access, they are not unable to bring their produce to the city centers. So price has actually gone up a bit. And also because some of the borders have been closed, for instance, Ghana is getting some of commodities like tomatoes, onion mostly from Burkina Faso, and because the borders have closed, I mean, there's a bit scarcity of such product, and price has gone up a bit.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. That is great information. We have another question coming in. So just wondering if you could share more about how we're innovating financial products to serve farmers during this time. Tim, I think this one might be a good one for you to start with.
Try to stop me. I'm incredibly excited on this front. We've put together an initial outlay of a financial institution partner toolkit, looking at new vehicles, new financial instruments to look at shifting risk. These are some tools and special purpose vehicles and security functions that are actually solving some of the biggest problems that we've had with growing our agricultural finance portfolios in general, regardless of COVID-19. And it wasn't until this crisis that our team actually started thinking significantly out of the box, more so than we've ever been pushed to. So with some of these, we're looking at ways to actually take the risky part of the portfolios off of our partners' banks, so that we can hedge them within a special purpose vehicle. We can send through additional dialogues on that, but at the same time, I know I want to keep this as straightforward as possible. But essentially, as opportunity, with our partners, with your support, we can actually take the risk that's going to the financial institutions and our bank partners off their books, and bring ourselves into that equation instead.
That's great information. Thank you, Tim. All right, our next question, keeping them at you, coming fast. So this one says, with reports on growing food insecurities and hunger in Africa due to COVID-19, is there anything smallholder farmers can do in response? Maybe Tim or Isaac have thoughts on that. I think you're both muted right now.
Isaac, do you want to start on that one and I can follow up?
Please, can she repeat the question? I think I missed some aspect of the question.
I'm sorry, I will be honest, my internet cut out. So did you say you would like me to repeat the question?
Yeah, yes.
Of course. Yeah, no, of course, I will definitely do that. It's with reports on growing food insecurity and hunger in Africa due to COVID-19. Is there anything smallholder farmers can do in response?
Yes, just like Tim said, agriculture is seasonal activities, and therefore you miss one season and you've missed the whole year. So what we are doing as an institution is to continue servicing our farmers, bearing in mind that this life will still continue after COVID-19. So we as an institution, everything is ongoing. We are still organizing groups. We are still giving them orientations. We are still supplying farm inputs, but we are all doing this with by observing all the COVID-19 protocol that the government has been doing. And because we think it's very important that we don't miss the entire season, because if we don't do this and we create any gap, what it means is that we are going to miss the entire season. So we are still engaging these farmers and providing the services that we have been providing. We are still continue doing that for the farmers.
Thank you so much, Isaac. Okay, we have another question. This one is for Tim. Can you tell us about the work you're doing with Impact Atlas to help farmers?
Yeah. So let me bounce back to the former question, and then I'll talk on the Impact Atlas side.
Of course.
I think it's a critical question that was asked, and the phrasing is absolutely important in terms of, I'm not sure who actually asked that question, but really, how can smallholder farmers respond in this crisis? These are the hands that are producing the food that I eat, that my wife eats, or the girls eat here across the board. So to what Isaac was also saying, farming is seasonal. We want to see farmers continue to produce despite uncertainty. We're here to be alongside with them, to encourage them, to give them more security, to continue to grow. We currently have a truck driving up from South Africa with pallets full of drip irrigation equipment. And we're partnering with, actually I see a number of Toro staff on the call as well, looking to expand. How do we make sure that farmers at this time, rains are finished in Malawi for the year? How can we keep growing? How can we keep producing? How can smallholder farmers continue to do what they do best? And that for us is what gives us joy on a day-to-day basis. Sorry, I got a little intense on that one. But on the question that was geared at me in terms of Impact Atlas, to move up and down within their own communities, serving the farmers on a house-by-house basis, giving them messaging around Impact Atlas for us was designed for agricultural training messaging. We've pivoted all, and Katie, this is where I have a video for you at the end of the Q&A, where we've pivoted, where we're actually taking public health messaging, send it through Impact Atlas. At the same time, we're developing financial diaries, so we can actually have farmers, and we're focusing first on female farmers to get them to report in terms of how COVID is directly affecting their incomes on a person-by-person basis. So Impact Atlas, for those of you that don't know, is an app-based platform that we are partnering to use. Currently, we're using it just here in Malawi. We're moving all of our operations in Uganda over to that and doing an expansion across all the countries. Part of why I wish I had 3 more years before this happened. At that point, we will be across all operations, but we're able to get granular, individualized data from tens of thousands of clients that we're serving. All right.
Thank you so much, Tim. All right, another question. Are locust invasions compounding the problems?
I'll take this one again, Katie. I think desert locusts haven't made their way to Ghana yet, thank God, but it most definitely is. I think we are getting quite lucky in Uganda specifically, where we have a large number of clients that we are serving. The reports that I've been getting is that specifically because of the soil types, a lot of the desert locusts aren't able to properly breed and reproduce for the coming season. So there's a little bit of a reprieve. The same time across the northern part of Uganda, there has been really significant crop disruption. This is really a once in 50 years, once in a century issue. And this immediately puts those countries in the Horn of Africa as well as parts of northern Uganda on the World Bank watch list in terms of major food insecurity crises.
Thank you for that. All right, we have another question. How are we forgiving or deferring loans and or interest? And then the second part of that question is, how will we fund any losses?
Katie, let me handle that. So, what we do is we do reschedulement of loans. And we started with, they've usually been about 90 days. In some cases now they might go up to about 6 months. So essentially both the principal and the interest is therefore is rescheduled. The loan's essentially extended out, right, with no repayments expected. As I mentioned earlier, as a result, there's a cash flow impact on the banks. How do we keep the banks operational? So we are actually arranging lines, liquidity lines for the banks. And part of our rapid response fund, the Survive to Thrive fund, goes to pay the additional borrowing costs for the banks. And we've been able to actually in a number of cases in the bank, for our banks, been able to arrange liquidity lines from very large multinational institutions like IFC and other large social banking lenders in Europe and Africa. So it's, and that is an ongoing exercise. What is the second part of the question, Katie?
The second part of the question is, how will we fund any losses?
Yeah, so, as I said, part of our rapid response fund that we are currently raising, charitable gifts for will go to pay for the borrowing costs so that the banks don't have, reschedule loans and now they have an additional cost of liquidity that they paid, and so you get a double whammy. So that's part of it. The other would be typical bank behavior. For those of you who've been in the industry or watched it, is the biggest expense line for banks is staff costs, right? Has been since all the time I've been a banker. So normal response for a banker is to cut staff. Boom, right? That's the first response for a banker. You're actually seeing it happen in American banks already at a very, very large scale. Including some of Wall Street's greatest. But we took the approach that, we need the best we should do is stagger staff but really a part of our funding that we're raising would then pay for the staff costs and furlough costs for a stopgap period. We believe that as market restrictions ease, our current planning and thinking, depending on the part of the world, is that we will start to get back to whatever the new normal looks like. And it's too early for me to say what that would look like today. When we have the next webinar in about 60 to 90 days, the world will be different. And we will talk about, what does that mean at that time, the answer to the second part of the question. How do we fund losses? What do we do with, our being first responders, our job is to maintain our staff. This will be the last thing to do right now, is to reduce critical staff services just when they're needed the most. We have permission from local authorities to go into these communities. In fact, in some instances, Colombia and elsewhere, we are amongst the few who are permitted on the roads. I know in Uganda as well. Currently, it's a both hand. We will, of course, being a nonprofit and very much a faith-based nonprofit, focus on our core capacity and our core strength of our donors and our supporters to support the banks through this process. The wonderful thing here, though, is that the impact on the charitable contributions is magnified many, many times because the banks are well run. We entered this strong, and that's testimony to the staff, Isaac and his colleagues, testimony to Tim and his colleagues, the designers and executors of our projects, and frankly, thanks to all of you. You gave us your time, talent, treasure, but you held us accountable, and I'm honored that we've honored your trust, and we entered strong. Globally, we entered this strong, as the Lord would have it. So your dollars go a far way to really help impact the neediest people. Kitty, I will add one point here, which I think is important to add, which relates to the costs. I want us to imagine a world where there is no opportunity bank. There's no bank serving the poor. That world actually exists for millions of farmers, specifically farmers. That is a world which is dominated by local money lenders, right? In my home country, about 80% of agricultural labor is indebted to local money lenders, 80%. What that means, indebtedness, is that the interest rates are so high and the repayments are designed in such a way that the indebtedness gets extended. And the person who is now, who's the debtor, in effect becomes an indentured laborer. So they pay off their debt by labor. And that has been the hard and the grim and the sad part, a reality of how farmers have responded to crisis like this. I wanted to say that because I want us to recognize the difference, the night and day difference of having an institution like Opportunity and others like us in these communities, specifically in farm communities, standing with these farmers, because the options that they have are not zero. They are servitude in many cases for life. I'm not making this up. So, the tradition of bonded labor, as it is called, is very deep in both in India and in Africa. So it's something to really, and I know my colleagues here really celebrate that what this effort that we have collectively has been able to do is not only in the good seasons improve the quality of life, in the bad seasons, our banks have become the safety net. And that's why we chose the theme of survive to thrive. Because if banks like ours were not there, we know exactly what would happen. Right. So, Kitty, I'll pause back to you because we can all get emotional. We are activists. Our hearts bleed for the poor. So thank you.
Thank you, Atul. So we have one last question for the group, and it is, Thinking 1 month, 3 months, and 6 months into the future, what are our biggest concerns for both our farmers and our partners?
I think we should let our African brothers go first.
Tim, why don't we start with you?
I was going to say Isaac's been on this continent longer than I have, but I can take the first stab and then pass it to you, and kind of you can move from there.
Okay. I think it's going to be quite challenging. Just like Eto said, liquidity is going to be a serious issue. Now that loans are not being repaid, what it means is that the institution is going to have issue with liquidity. However, we also need to support these farmers. We also need to support these farmers because we cannot leave them at this critical period. They need us, and we need to do all what we can to support our farmers. So for me, I think it's a very critical one, but we have no excuse leaving our farmers at this critical period. We have to find whatever we can to support them so that they'll be able to sail through these difficult times.
Thanks, Isaac. From my side, and this is a tough question because we are working with a lot of unknowns day in and day out, but from my point of view, I think, if we reframe this in 1 month, 3 months, and 6 months, month one is about employment in agricultural systems, making sure that farmers continue to work, making sure that agribusiness continue to employ, that extension service providers, trainers continue to train farmers. That's really the critical first hit. If those jobs are lost within that first line, the ramifications are enormous. And the second is making sure that people can access liquidity, which is exactly what Atul is talking on, making sure that cash flow is there. We just finished a phenomenal online training on risk reviews and looking at businesses. You might have the most profitable business in the world, but if you don't have cash flow, it doesn't matter, you go bankrupt. So in terms of the 3 month, cash flow, making sure that people continue to hire, continue to pay their employees, continue to meet their debts, and pay for their supply chain. And then the 6 month one, from my point of view, is there will be a lag effect in terms of the number of farmers that haven't been lucky enough to plant for this season, haven't been able to access good training. So in 6 months, we will see a dramatic downturn in productivity on the farms. That's my 2 cents on that.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks so much. And on the same way, 1, 3, and 6 months, I think the 1 month, it's pretty clear what our partners and banks are doing and what we need to do in terms of both client support and staff support. I know for Ghana, who's on the line here, they are having their COVID-19 emergency meetings. I think, is it every week or every day, Isaac? Your management. Yeah. And it's a very clear plan and so on. As we look at the 90 days, I think liquidity becomes very important. All right, how do you make sure that the liquidity stays? And we have worked on that. 6 months, right now, there are, as Tim said, there are very significant unknowns. What we do believe and what we have to be prepared for the banks, in frankly, 2 words is lower profitability. Higher risk and lower profitability, right? So for that to happen, we of course need to today work hard on adequate cash availability, but we also then need to work hard on figuring out how to reduce the cost of funds, right? Which is alongside staff costs is the other big chunk of cost here, and those solutions will look slightly different in different parts of the world. Ghana has excelled our operations in Ghana at garnering small deposits from our clients. They're a deposit-rich bank. So how do you continue that for them very specifically over the next 6 months? That, whatever available cash our clients have, the $44, how do you actively solicit more funds, small amounts? The banks elsewhere in Africa are not as deposit rich. So they have, as we speak, launching 2 deposit mobilization strategies, both retail, so things, frankly, practical things. I mean, we are bankers, right? All right, so people respond to interest rates. So, let's take up, increase the interest rates available to our small depositors, right? So how do you incentivize them to deposit? And then large institutional deposits. So those strategies we actually started working on bank by bank about 2 weeks back. And I am pleased to say that there has been rapid progress. We are on the 6-month front as well, right in the middle of conversations with several USAID, of course, which I think this group particularly will be very pleased to hear that a number of faith-based microfinance organizations networks came together. Vision Fund, which is World Visions, Hope, World Relief, and Opportunity, to make a very joint large proposal for along the same lines we're talking about here, specifically for our African banking networks and for support in agricultural finance. We are similarly speaking with, in conversations right now with several large American foundations, both from Google, Goldman Sachs, and others, for support. So we are actively on the ground planning on cost management measures, cost of funds and deposit mobilization, liquidity increases, and then on as a management response, and then on the here in the global north to shore up the bank balance sheets, if you will, with large influx of support, both charitable dollars as well as institutional. So that's a bit of how do you manage risk. And I think beyond that, we just have to stay alert and vigilant. At the same time, I would say, to hold close to our heart our values, our commitment to the poor, our compassion, our care, and not to forget that we are here to serve the interests of our clients first and bank second, and not the other way around. Right, and so we are means to the end. The end is that our clients survive and thrive. So we've got to keep that in mind. And I want to tell you and assure you that both, I can speak for my board, who is several of you on the call. Thank you, Leanne. Our board chair is, I know she's on the call here. Our board has been very, very focused on that. I'm grateful. They hold our backs up and keep reminding us, as well as our supporters are and our staff is. So for me, that is actually the biggest hope and plan is that we stay committed to each other, to our faith, and to a real hope here, which guides us, which has. I am convinced, personally convinced, as I hand back to Kerry, our farmers have gone through many crises. In fact, their lives have been marked by crisis for generations. This crisis, I believe they will tackle. It's a harder one than the others, but then they have each other and they have you and they have us. I believe they will tackle this because of that. They have faith in God and faith in each other, and they have trusted advisors and partners. They will tackle it. But the condition for that to happen is that we join together. The absolute condition for that to happen is that we join together. And Kerry, I'll hand back to you. I love the Gandalf quote. We don't choose the time. All that we choose is what to do with the time given us. So we've chosen. We want to stand with the poor. So thank you.
Thank you, Atul. I got to tell you guys, just from where I sit, I am so impressed with Isaac and Tim and Atul, what you're doing in this. I mean, you're just so fluid. You're managing this crisis. Isaac, it's so clear to me that you're so dedicated to your farmers. It kind of made my heart well up when I listened to you. And Tim, I wrote down the stay afloat so the farmers can go to work tomorrow. And I think that's what impacts me so much as I've been listening to the webinars and listening to you guys speak. I want to help. I want to help you with that. I want to help make sure that the farmers, they don't miss the farming season. I don't want them to mess up the whole year. And I feel like everybody on this call, understands that our clients and our families, their families need us more than ever right now. You made that really clear. And I just wanted to make sure that our farmers get the help in their biggest time of need. I know that I want to look back on this time and know that I was part of the solution and I helped. And I hope that everyone on the call feels that way too. So if I may, I want to ask if there's a place that we can go on Atul or Katie, if we can put something up on this website so people on this call can give to the Rapid Response Fund. And if we could leave that website on the link on the website as we end the call, I know that I'd love to give today also. But I just wanted to end by thanking everybody that took time to be on this call. I know that we're all dealing with our own stuff in our own homes. And I hope that everybody's families are safe and you're happy and healthy and you're staying somewhat sane during this time. And just thank you so much for being with us today and for listening in. Hope you have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your expertise, for your passion, for the
Thank you.
love.